Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do.
In this episode, I interview Kat Casey, Chief Growth Officer of Reveal, whose unique journey from existential philosophy to AI evangelism has made her one of the most trusted voices helping legal professionals navigate the AI renaissance without fear. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm your host, Tom Martin, and I'm really thrilled today to have Kat Casey, the TechnoCat, on today. She is the Chief Growth Officer at Reveal, and it's a pleasure to have her here today. Kat, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you're up to now.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, thank you. I was like herding 87 cats to get me on here because I'm on the road 230 days a year. You are a saint, and I appreciate it. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kat Casey. I go by the cheeky nickname, the TechnoCat. And I have been an AI evangelist for coming on 20 years because I started when I was 5, clearly. I am currently a Chief Growth Officer for a company called Reveal, so AI to find evidence faster. And in that role, I do a little bit of kind of chief innovation role, so working with clients to improve tech, and a lot of going out and evangelizing, not so much about my company, but more about how does this universe of legal professionals who went to law school because math and science is scary, embrace this AI renaissance and not feel like they're being left behind. And so I do 50 or 60 or sometimes 70 different online and in-person trainings, a ton of writing, and my goal is to sort of ELI 5, explain it like I'm 5, these complex topics in a way that someone maybe with a more liberal arts education will feel comfortable. And I do that from my own crippling imposter syndrome because my background is existential philosophy, which was a great path to be an awesome barista, but not necessarily the path most people think of when they're thinking AI evangelist. And so at a very high level, that's what I do. And I'm involved in some organizations like the New York Bar AI Task Force, giving some guidance on kind of ethics and remediation around kind of the adoption of AI, Women in E-Discovery, just got a great award with them, and then a couple different charities that are law adjacent. But my big why, big W, is to make this AI renaissance less uncertain and more manageable for people.
I think that's fantastic. We have a few things in common that we talked before we jumped on, and philosophy is one of them. It's interesting how like a lot of the soft skills and soft sciences have really come into play at this moment.
Well, I'd agree completely. I've talked with a couple of people, like there's insecurity about embracing tech, certainly by a lot of rainmakers, but what is a lawyer, a partner, if not a master of the written word, a master of breaking problems down into manageable pieces? Well, that's the secret power to getting great results with generative AI. And so I've been writing more and more about not so much human-centered AI, that is a hot spot for me, but also the unique kind of force multipliers and differentiators the legal profession has to not just be most disruptive, but also most able to adopt and adapt to using this technology because it's based on issue spotting, breaking down problems, and mastery of language. And so it's kind of exciting. Like it's the FOMO is there, but the imposter syndrome not so much. It's kind of a nice balance.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely seems like that Venn diagram of what LLMs can do and what lawyers do is definitely, overlapping, as I think Bob Ambrogi put it, and he's right on. It can be a force multiplier, and I think, it'd be beneficial for more people to see it that way.
Well, I joke. It's like when Thanos snapped, right? He said he was inevitable. At this point, stopping AI and Gen AI is like trying to stop a tsunami one molecule at a time. You might succeed with the one molecule, but the water's coming fast. And so how do you prepare? How do you adapt? How do you make sure you're not a late adopter? You're kind of middle of the curve or early adopter so that you get the benefit of knowing and being seen as an expert and maybe getting that level up in your career. It's a daunting and truly exciting, transformative time, unlike really any I've seen in my career.
And you've had an amazing career, and will have going forward. And like you also, I should mention to the audience, you seem to be everywhere. You mentioned the herding cats, and that's I mean, you were doing a lot of things, a lot of great things at different conferences, and you're prolific in your writing and getting out there on LinkedIn and other social media. And I don't know how you do it. Like it, it's certainly a lot.
I call it my weaponized ADHD. Like I get hyper focused on things I care a lot about, and honestly, like forget about work life. Mine's all blended together because like my big passion, my big why is I want to help people in this AI craziness. And so when I'm super interested, I can produce a lot. I write a lot. I'm constantly thinking about it. Yeah, like the Hulk. Like my secret is I'm always fixated on it. Not that I find time to be.
That's great. Love the Avengers. Uh,
The
but
dorkiness is strong with me.
yes, that's a good preview of like stuff that we can get into a little more deeply. And right now, I want to do what, the audience knows that I love to do is get into people's origin stories. And so I want to take us back a bit and find out how you got to where you're at. What were the early influences? What was your neighborhood like? Where did you grow up and all that stuff? So, you know, uh, where did you grow up?
So I went to 13 schools and I grew up in Boston, California, and Texas. So I was kind of ping ponging, no government. My parents just have a similar, they joke they have some gypsy blood, but we are actually Bohemian, which is the origin of the gypsies, right? So I moved around a lot, which believe it or not, early on, I was cripplingly insecure. I know the sparkles and being out there doesn't really seem that way, but I would turn red from like the chest up when I had to talk. So I studied debate, I studied philosophy. I wanted to understand how to make language work for me so I didn't feel insecure. But the why and how I got to here is 12 years old. I'm sitting on a swing and I'm the kid they put on the picnic table because I'm like teaching myself pre-cal in third and fourth grade. So I was very good at math, but I was also great with words. And when you're 10, 12, sitting on a swing, you're kind of binary. And my thought was, well, math means I'd be a doctor. And if I mess up, they're dead. Words means lawyer. And if I mess up, I can appeal. And that was my entire thought process that then led me, right into undergrad. I graduated at 20, right into law school at 21. And then I realized, oh, I don't know if I want to do this as like a day-to-day because I was great at transactional stuff. And I had an interesting piece of my backstory that I don't think most people know is my grandfather actually created virtual memory. Two of his computers are in the Smithsonian. And so I had access really early to like, I had a laptop at like 10. I had technology. There was like, the Apple II and all of these computer parts. I grew up in a place where even though I wasn't necessarily studying hard coding and science, the language of technology was very common, very familiar. And so when I got out of law school, I was like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. And first, I was like, maybe I'll do sales. My dad did high-end defense contracting, and I was like, well, what type of sales would I do? Definitely the gross kind. Got to be selling cars, but only the fancy kind. I'll sell BMWs in Orange County, and within 3 months, I'm the top grossing salesperson in North America. And someone I sold the car to for 20 grand over a sticker because I was good was like, your background is law, tech. Why aren't you working in light industry e-discovery? And so that was actually what opened the door that brought me back into legal. And I started using my power with language, my skill of translation, and my understanding of tech conceptually, even though my background wasn't tech. And so I started on the staffing side, and really quickly I started writing about game theory and machine learning. Actually, Judge Grimm quoted me when I was like 23, and I didn't know till 5 years later. And I started writing and thinking and talking about AI, and I willed a path forward around AI, even when, machine learning was before De Silva Moore came out, before Andy Peck was advocating for it. And by kind of seizing my own megaphone and looking at what my skills were, which is translation, comfort with tech, even though I wasn't the one coding, and a willingness to kind of just put my words out there and step on the stage, I sort of evolved into this, thought leader in the space, which was pretty unexpected. And then I wanted to earn my chops. So I went from the people side to the tech side, working at a couple different software companies. I put some time in at the Big Four, helping build their computer forensic program, PwC, KPMG. I had one job in a law firm, and it was Gibson Dunn's global head of technology, which I had actually forwarded the job to 5 friends, didn't think to apply until the guy I was going to replace was like, why haven't you applied? And then when I was at the top of that heap, at the best role in the industry, most people would think, I was like, why am I not happy? What's missing? And I realized that my why, I quit listening to my why, which is I want to help people navigate this change. And I couldn't do it in a law firm. And so I took a leap and I went to a startup and we built a role around it where I was, partly voice of the customer, partly working with engineers, partly in the trenches, but then also partly just out there on stage on podcasts, traveling around the world and helping people be a little less daunted by AI. And, I've continued that on to where I am at Reveal, where my CEO is basically like, Cat, go do cat shit. I love you. And since then, it's been kind of meteoric. It's been crazy. So that's a long way of saying a weird and winding path that I have tons of imposter syndrome for and none because there was no right way to get to what I do now.
There's a lot for us to unpack there.
No.
And one thing, though, I love from what you said was that you willed the path forward, right? Because I know that I've experienced that in my own life is that I guess I phrase it a little differently, like if you don't get a seat at the table, make your own table, right? Same idea is that you don't have to seek permission from someone to do what you love. Just do it.
Well, and I also made myself try things twice. So the first time I spoke, like I told you, I'm an undercover introvert, right? My CEO, Mark Yakino, who I love, he put me up to be a moderator. He gave me a shove because I was backing out, like trying to go away. And I stumbled onto the stage and it was awkward and awful. And I sort of hated it, but I'm like, I'll give it one more try. And then I loved it. And now I do 50 or 60 speaking engagements on there. So I willed the path forward on things I wanted, but then I also forced myself to make sure I liked or didn't like something before I wrote it off. Because I think sometimes people try something once and like never again. And I wanted to make sure I'm like, fool me once, maybe fool me twice, then I can decide I don't want to go forward. And it's been surprising the things I've gravitated towards, which I wouldn't have guessed. I was talking at the Women in E-Discovery conference about my first big sales meeting, and I'm still friends with this person with bad bangs, gray suit, no color because I was afraid it would insult someone, kitten 1-inch heels, and terribly insecure I don't belong here. So much so that the person I met with started rooting for me because she felt so badly, right? All the way to now, like I will be in chaos sparkles and step on any stage. And it's been a really interesting journey to not just find myself, but find my lane, make my lane, and also remake myself. I've had a lot of different chapters. TechnoCat's only the last 5 years. Before that, I was eDiscovery Cat. So I've pivoted the look, the feel, the content, the substance as the industry shifted, and openly so. I'm not shy about it. Like I've always talked AI, but not this comprehensively as I do now.
Well, let's go back to the beginning again. You mentioned that you grew up in Boston, California,
and Texas, yeah.
And then Texas, and you're in Austin, Texas now, right?
I am, yeah. So I moved back right before COVID.
Yeah. So what was Boston, California like? I've never been there.
Well, Boston and California. So Boston, Mass, and then.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the city
So
I hadn't heard of
I
before.
lived in the burbs of Boston briefly. I lived there for like when I was a baby, and then I moved back. But my parents are from like the Winchester area, and it's great schools, very education focused. Think of Cape Cod. That's basically the look and feel, a little bit like old school with like the little critter patterns. But I had a big family that were very centric there. And then on the California side, I grew up just inland from Malibu, and schools weren't as great, so I kind of had to make my own path. And we ended up, our last year there was the floods, the fires, the O.J. Simpson riots, the mudslides, and something else. And so we moved to Texas, where had great schools, had access to a lot of computers, had a really great ability to get on through the debate team and speech and sort of think about, what I wanted to do. Briefly was a Texas cheerleader because someone said I couldn't. And I was like, well, I'll show you. So 2 years of Texas cheerleading. So it's been a mixed bag. But that's probably why I have no accent. You don't hear a y'all. You don't hear my dropping the R's, and I'm not like twirling my hair like, oh my gosh, right? So I'm kind of a hodgepodge of the country, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, I think having, those different experiences, those diverse experiences definitely helps right now because one develops a familiarity and a comfort level with change. That is exactly what's going on right now. You said that your grandfather invented virtual memory.
Yeah, so he was part of, so if you're old, like older than me. Before Silicon Valley, there was the 128 corridor. So you had Apollo and Prime, which he founded, and Stardust, all these companies that were helping computers go from, I'm sure you've seen like the memes of like, it used to take a room this big for a computer. Now it takes a tiny chip. Well, he was part of that. So he helped develop a lot of the systems and the hardware. And because of that, there was talk of technology, and there were computers. When I was like maybe 10, like my birthday gift was like one of those 2-inch thick like think books, and so I had access to computers in a different way than some of my other elder millennials. I'm 1982, so I'm on the cusp, than other folks might. And I think because of that, even though I didn't academically pursue hard science, I was a good translator. Like even with my moving around, so Boston to California to Texas, you couldn't have very much more different cultures in the country, right? I've been good at being a chameleon, but also translating, using language and how I speak to bridge the gaps of geography, but also bridge the gaps of understanding. Like my early career, '06 was the year the FRCP came out with e-discovery, and you had lawyers who often didn't pursue techies who were like, why are the lawyers talking to me, and how do I bridge that gap? And someone like me would be able to explain like, well, to the IT team, here's why the lawyers are concerned, and to the lawyers, like, here are the considerations you have. And so by becoming that hub, one, my career accelerated dramatically, but two, it taught me something that is instrumental now, being that translator from those that know to those that want to know, and even to those that are afraid to learn.
So also an early influence was your father. You said he had a bit of an entrepreneurial bent to him.
Yeah, so he was doing like large scale defense contracting. He would bring home pieces of technology and be like, you can't touch that. That's part of a nuclear reactor we're building. Or, hey, I'm not supposed to tell you, but we're working on like this B-2 bomber thing. It's going to be really cool. I was very lucky too in that, my dad didn't treat me like a kid or even a daughter. It was almost like a little intern. So he'd be working on a big proposal or a new model or something on like, multi-billion-dollar deal with the government, and he would be like, hey, I want you to lay out all these slides and make sure they all make sense. Or he would involve me in that. And so because I was an oldest of four, but I was the only for 5 or 6 years, and I was talked to like a peer. I mostly grew up in smoky jazz bars, and then as an intern of my dad, I sort of had this ability to generationally bridge the gap too, and kind of seem both older, and now I guess I'm getting younger with age than I was, but also not intimidated about learning new concepts and processes. And I mean, to this day, my dad and I will still spitball stuff. And the coolest thing ever was actually maybe 2-3 weeks ago, my grandfather was in town. He was visiting his sister who was having a big birthday, so my great aunt. And my dad was explaining to my grandfather what I do. And it was awesome to hear how, like, my grandfather knows what I do, but it was interesting to hear him explain it, because it's like, oh, you have been listening the last 20 years. Like,
That's awesome. That's awesome to have those influences from your family, but also to be able to have that continued rapport with them, to see how it's developing over time and to see what they think about it. How about your mother? Like, what influence did she have on you?
So my mom, like, she was a mom, like, so she had 4 kids when she was 35. So she was boom, boom, boom. But what's been really interesting is seeing her renaissance later in life. She actually is learning to code. She's gotten some AI certifications, and like, she's early 60s, got some grandbabies, and she is just like looking at what her passions. And she's had a lot of different careers. She did like, accounting and bookkeeping. She was teaching for a while, some real estate. So she's always looking for what, catches her mind and what's most interesting. But it's been really interesting to see her, she'll talk with her grandbaby, my eldest niece, who's like learning to code in school, and like they're talking about making games together. And, I think it was really cool for my mom, because it was her father that created all the virtual memory. So she's tech conversant, but the careers she chose wasn't super technology-y. And so it's been really interesting to see her evolve and pivot. And it's, it's a good reminder that whatever chapter you're in is not the end of your book. You can start writing a new one at any time. And, they're on joking, not even joking, like my parents are on house 40 5 or 6 in my lifetime. They are constantly moving and going and looking for what's next. And so one thing I learned from them is, there's no one dream home. There's no one dream career. You can have those moments, those vignettes in time. And, that's probably why I've lived all over the country and had different roles. It's, you can find amazing anywhere.
Well, sometimes amazing is where the people that you love are, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned that you have 3 siblings.
Yep. So I'm the oldest of 4. I've got 2 younger sisters that are 5 and 7 years younger, and then my brother is 14 years younger. And I've got my baby sister did kind of the mom thing, but my middle sister she works in private equity as like this SVP of HR, and my brother was testifying before Congress around drone work he was doing at he would have been 25, and so he's doing some crazy stuff, incorporating AI into defense contracting stuff, or defense direct with the DoD, smart weaponry where you can kind of see around corners using AI, drone, kind of swarm drone stuff, really interesting. And so we've got a very high achieving family, but also in very different ways. It's been really interesting and kind of awesome to hype them up as they do great things.
Well, that's great. I'm kind of curious though, like being the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
I know with my 2 daughters, my older daughter, she's become she's very practical. She's very organized. My younger daughter is maybe more attention seeking, more outspoken. Was there like a difference in personalities that way amongst you and your siblings?
We all kind of had our own swim lanes. I was the smart one. So I was the one that would finish undergrad or all that sort of stuff. I was very much high expectations academically. Not that the others didn't do good, but they had different roles. My middle sister was the artistic one. So theater and art and all of this kind of creative stuff. But now she's using AI and HR. My baby sister was the sporty one, so a soccer star, and my brother was the boy. So, 15 years younger, my parents were just one category. It's been interesting though, as we've grown up, how we have crossed over into each other's swim lanes. I've become much more creative over the years, painting and writing and creative stuff. My sister, who was more the creative type, she's still creative, but she's using AI and building AI models for private equity. My brother, he's definitely squarely an engineer, but he can fake creativity. And then my kind of sporty, outgoing, competitive sister ended up kind of doing the mom route. And so it's been interesting to see the evolution. We've kind of all evolved in parallel. And it's, I was the kid who was, reading Shakespeare because my grandma said that she would pay me 10 books of play when I was 9, very bookish, very in my own world and mainly surrounded by adults. And then my sisters kind of grew up in a different era with more peers. And you would not know we had the same parents, but when we get together, you clearly can see we grew up together.
But at the same time, it's great to have that entrepreneurial incentive from your grandmother to read through this.
I read a lot of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Retention, not great, but my recall, very wide. Precision.
Yeah. A lot of accounts payable.
Yeah.
And with that, you ended up you went to Harvard and you got through there in 3 years.
Yeah. So I don't know if I've shared this actually. So my grandfather it wasn't facilities, the head of grounds for Harvard. And so he had actually, my dad had gone, his wife had gone, but he had brain cancer. He had a brain tumor. And so we weren't sure if he was going to make it. So 2 years in, my dad called me and, I'm already trying to finish in 3.5 years. And we tried to accelerate it so that he could see me walk down. We almost made it. I ended up getting an associate degree just so he could see me walk the stage and then finishing up I don't know, however many months later. But I've got a little competitive streak. So if I'm told, hey, can you beat this time? My answer is yes. By how much?
Wow. That's really sweet.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Well, and he was the grumpiest Irish man you've ever met. He hated everyone aside from me. I was his number one princess. So, I had a lot of incentive. It was all carrot, no stick.
Well, that's a great story. It's also very impressive that you got through in 3 years. There's talk about competitive That's a pretty competitive school.
I regret it a little bit now that I understand the importance of your tribe and your network, because I really, like, I was going through summer school, day course, night course. I was just go, 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 like complete. And I look back and I feel like I missed out on like creating that network of people, which now I am people first and kind of acquiring the accolades second. And it's not a regret. It's just I wonder what would have happened if I valued that earlier, because even though I'm inundated in technology, the people side is how I stay up to speed on my skills, how I stay connected, how I get, my last 5 roles have been through people that know me. So it's been an interesting paradigm shift of not just how fast can I achieve, but who can I connect with along the way. And I think if I had it to do over again, I would take 4 years and actually invest in the people too. But you live and you learn. At least it was a lesson I learned by like 20. I think I graduated before I could drink. So by the time I got to bar review, I was actually at the bar reviewing, not just highlighting the books.
So you mentioned when you were, I think you said 11 or 12 on the swing, kind of thinking about 2 different paths. One
Yeah,
path being mathematics and science, the other path being, the arts and English. And
yeah, 100%.
when you thought of that and like the kind of English, soft science, like that way of going to lead, you were actually thinking that at that point, at that moment about going to law?
100%. Like it was and I was a very like not just introverted, but like inward looking, like self-analyzing person. And so I was really thinking like, you know, I don't think I can be ahead of the curve on both. I think at some point I'm going to have to start making the pivot. And this must have been when I was 12, probably because I was about to move out of California, move to Texas. And at 12, you actually went into middle school in Texas. So electives and all of that. And so for me, it was really like I can keep going the math and science way. And again, I'm 12. So I have one option. There's not this whole universe of things I could have done. It's one. And if I make a mistake, they're dead. And then if I went in the way of law, I can appeal. And that was the full thought process really until I was in law school, when I was like, do I actually want to practice? And I mean, I've never practiced because what I'm good at, I don't love doing. And so it was actually, I forced myself to kind of take a step back and be like, what do I want to do? And I'm glad I did, because I would have been a great practicing lawyer, but I would not have the impact I have from the path I took. I think, it was a little bit of a scary leap before you look moment, but I'm glad it's a leap I took.
I want to get some clarity on something you said. Like you said, what I'm good at, I don't like doing. What was
I
that?
was very good at like transactional stuff, drafting, like just meticulous detail. It was, while I would have been an okay litigator, what I excelled at was kind of that meticulous attention to detail. And, I think a lot of people, especially when you go to like a very liberal arts school, and I'm studying all this philosophy and political philosophy and debate and the theory of it's, how do we build this more perfect universe, versus when you get into law in the trenches, you're learning black letter, you're learning rote, you're learning what's existing. And there's room to shift and innovate. But certainly when I was attending law school, like e-discovery wasn't even talked about. So the thought of being in a creative, changing and dynamic space, it didn't seem like it aligned. Like I think if I went to law school today with all the impact of AI, Gen AI, technology, and how legal's become sort of the tip of the spear with the Gen AI renaissance, it might be a different scenario. But back in 2003, it was a different option, and it didn't excite me. And I think that was the first time I was like, well, I've been striving for this goal I set at 12. I'm on the precipice of it. Is this goal what tied to my why? And I didn't know my why yet, but is it something I want to do? Does it give me joy? Will I feel fulfilled? And I couldn't answer yes. It wasn't a no, but I couldn't answer yes. And so I had to look at, well, what are some other options?
I mean, it's so mature of you at the age of 12 to have a gauge on where you wanted to go, and then to ask yourself again once you got there, if this was connected to your why. I think that is beyond years,
I'm
actually.
getting younger with age, is what everyone tells me. Like it's funny though. I didn't have the fun. I didn't go out there. I was very just like goal oriented. And as I've learned myself better, I've realized my goal is bigger than do the thing. It's the bring the people along the way, achieve it, feel fulfilled. And I mean, a big aha was I'm literally sitting over a $90 million book of business at Gibson, number one litigation firm in the world, 25 offices, a job I had thought I was dreaming of, and frankly didn't think I was qualified for. Obviously, I was, and unhappy. So, like, sometimes you just have to take that moment and be like, well, why am I unhappy? And it was like, well, there's things that give me more joy, that fulfill me, that I can't do because of the constraint of a law firm. Am I willing to take the risk? And it was really a pretty, like, I wrote it down. What am I good at that I like? What am I good at that I don't like? What am I bad at that I would like to do that I think I can get better? What am I bad at that I don't like to do? And then when I went to their competitors, so I won't say their name, but another software company, I literally worked with someone who I'd known for a couple of years, who courted me for a year to actually join the company, to build out a role that matched what I thought I could be, kind of the unicorn for the company at. And learned a couple lessons from it, kind of changed some of the structure a little bit, and then went to where I'm at, Reveal, and said, this is where I think I can help you go from who is Reveal to the heir apparent. And to have someone believe that and back it was kind of a really good full circle moment of all those decisions and self-evaluation and honesty kind of becoming a reward. And my visibility, my fulfillment, and my output have all just been double exponential since then.
So the company before, although we won't name names, was also an e-discovery company, right?
So I was the chief innovation officer for Disco. I joke. I've actually friends there. Yeah, and there was a guy who had a similar kind of alternative background. He was a CMO. He saw me speak at a master's conference and said, "Hey, I have this idea." And I said, "Hey, shove it." It was like midnight at Faces and Names at Legal Week. But then we stayed in touch, and a year later, my baby sister actually needed brain surgery. She's fine now, and I wanted to move back to Austin. The company was in Austin. I was like, well, let's revisit this. And so we went back and forth with the founder, with this gentleman Neil Etheridge, and we built something that was really cool. And it was a C title in name only. And so what I really wanted was a seat at the table, plus the ability to influence, plus the ability to bring context. And that wasn't the right spot to do it. And I kind of outgrew it. And so when I made the leap over to Reveal, I was pretty honest, like, this is what it'll take. And I was the first thing that K1, our private equity company, bought after they bought Reveal and Brainspace. I was the first big hire. I actually had an interview with the entire private equity company and was the first announcement after. And I was like, hey, if I can convince the land of spreadsheets, the person who fits in no box is a good hire, that must be a good thing.
Let me ask you this, like, how did you recognize in yourself what your strengths were, that you knew to focus on those? And then, it's not everyone that's met with success when they focus on them. So what, if you could try to unpack, like, what that alchemy was that happened where you were able to take advantage of that?
It sounds like a lot of introspection, and it wasn't. It was actually from building a tribe of people I trusted and listening to them. When I started writing I've been on LinkedIn at this point for almost as long as eDiscoveries existed, 18 years. I used it as a way to directly talk to people, to ask questions, to form a connection. And so I've got a really good decade and a half plus tribe. And so as I was evolving and looking at different things, I had this kind of person 5 years from where I want to be, peer person 5 years ago, what I was doing, kind of like a trifecta I would do when I was looking to make a big pivot. And I would ask people for honest feedback. And then I would look at how the world was reacting. Like, you don't always want to judge anything by vanity metrics in terms of likes and engagement. But if you see a pattern of people reacting more, as I wrote more, as I spoke more, being more willing, more able to trust me, having opportunities come to me, I sort of leaned into it. So it wasn't I decided I'm good at this, I shall do it. It was, I'm going to look at the feedback loop. I'm going to see what the response is. Do I enjoy doing it? Maybe I'll keep doing it. And so it was an iterative process. And I think the flavor of Pat you see now really, I did the rebrand about 5 years ago to TechnoCat, and that was kind of a synthesis of everything. But I would say kind of being comfortable speaking, being visible, being out there. 15 maybe, 16. So it took a decade and change to get there, but it was incremental. It was, I went, I spoke, I hated it. I tried one more time, and then I got that good dopamine hit and a good reaction. And people started telling me I was helping them. And for me, that's, that's the gateway drug. That's I can describe my why however it is, but if people say, hey, you're helping me, or hey, I didn't think of that, and you made it easier, or hey, I had this problem, you helped me with it, like that is just like the dopamine is right there. And so I kind of chased the high of doing things that help people, and by looking less internally what's good for me and more externally, good things really started to happen.
Well, just so the audience knows, I mean, you have over 28,000 followers on LinkedIn, I believe.
Yeah. And it's funny, like I had maybe 5,000 up until 2019 when I was at Gibson. And when I made the pivot of I'm not going to have to PwC, KPMG, Gibson, I had to get, clearance to post anything. And it was more, this article is interesting. I will make no qualitative assessment. But once I could start being me and I started asking things and thinking, like my thread is always kind of a couplefold, like, three pillars of it. It's, what's my why? So helping people, what are my internal driving forces? And for me, it's, being able to uplift, being able to amplify, I want to draw the eyeballs. I call it narcissism for good. I want you to look at me so I can shine it back at people. And then what's my goal? Right. And the first two never really change. The last one does. My goal might shift. I would say 5 years from now, we're probably going to be talking about, hey, what are you doing being the evangelist for this foundational model as opposed to purely in the niche of e-discovery? But once I started kind of following those three tenets and looking at what can I give versus what can I take, the adoption, the growth, the amount of people that wanted to talk and interact, it just flew through the roof. And then I look at other communication channels, like I've done some TikToks. I don't get it, but it's fun. Twitter, I am a lurker. I occasionally post. YouTube, I've done some content, but I kind of found a lane that worked. And I know no one believes me, but like I almost never post on like Instagram or Facebook. Like it's proof of life occasionally for family members. But yeah, once I figured out what is the thing that I uniquely can give to people, which is I can make scary things understandable. Like I got some crap earlier on when I was writing that I was writing to entry level. I'm like, well, if Einstein said if you can explain it in a simple way, then you actually understand a topic, I don't feel insecure about that. And I realized a lot of people were reading the deep dives and they didn't have the language or the skills to understand it. So I help bridge that gap and bring them along on the journey. And once I started doing that, it was really shocking how much people reacted and responded. And, I continue to lean into that. Not 100%. I did one time tear my Achilles tendon, have a picture of a robot on my foot after stem cells injected that I thought was so cool. It got 150,000 views, and I realized it was because of a foot, not because of my cool post. So if I was purely chasing vanity statistics, I would have a lot more feet pics. That was not my why. So that's my gut check. But otherwise, I listen. What are people responding to? What is helping? And the funny thing is, I mean, you're active on LinkedIn too. The number of people who never once interact, never once like, but then will talk to me afterwards and like articulate a post I did in detail and how helpful it was is massive. And so I kind of had to like look at the trends, not the raw numbers, and sort of see, is the pattern moving in the right direction? And just know that the vast majority of people that I'm helping, I may never know, but it's bigger than those numbers at the bottom of my LinkedIn post.
Absolutely. It's 100% reaffirming to hear people tell you, like that really helped me.
I'm like, I feel like I'm shouting in the void and sparkles sometimes, thank God.
So those tenets that you mentioned, amplify, goal.
So for me, it's like, what's your why? What are your kind of your core values and what's your objective, right? And it's a three-legged stool. And I use them to like gut check. Like my why is to help people bridge this knowledge gap. My kind of my core, like those things that are true to me is, honesty, uplifting people, candor, all that sort of stuff. And a little narcissism for good. I do want people to look at me. And then my goal, right? My goal was to be a thought leader in e-discovery. And so for 15 years, I had e-discovery cat as my handle, as my website, and my writing style evolved, but it wasn't quite as irreverent and cheeky. And so when I made the pivot in between Disco and Reveal, it was because the world was shifting and e-discovery. I don't think the term e-discovery will exist in a couple more years aside from a process. It's going to be data, risk management, and value extraction. So I made a pivot for my brand for the topic, but then I tried to also distill in more of the authentic me. And so you've got cheeky cat stuff, bright colors and sparkles, and kind of I call it cheekiness when I write. It's a reverence. It's not quite snarky. I'm sharing the joke with you. You're not the butt of the joke, but it's still professional. And I intentionally kind of distilled that. And so I think that's why the last 5 years, everything's grown so much, because I kind of was able to bottle my why, the who I am, and aim it at a new goal. So it's been pretty exciting.
And I think one of the unique geniuses of what you've accomplished is that you've blended them all together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the brand of TechnoCat that you've developed over, a couple of decades. I mean, the past decade has been TechnoCat, but putting that together with your point of view and authenticity, that makes people like connect with you.
Well, and I want people when they're scrolling to like, if it's pink and teal and there's robots and there's certain like language choices, to just sort of know it's me. Like, even if they don't stop and like it, to just have that familiarity. And so then I become a person, but also an entity, also a resource. And it's been very interesting. So my background's not marketing, like, at all, and I've sort of become the resident hype queen for AI in legal. But it's interesting because when I started using ChatGPT, it was able to synthesize how I write in such a way I couldn't tell the difference, because I was playing around with it, because there was so much content out there, and this voice, I had so many linguistic similarities in how I wrote. It was consistent. And I think maybe it's because I quit separating me from brand, right? I just started bringing more of authentic me. And, clothing wise, do I always wear sparkles? No, I'm more Metallica t-shirt and ripped jeans at home, but I sound the same. I talk the same. There's a kind of thread of authenticity. And with that, suddenly there's trust. And if you trust someone who's helping you navigate something scary, that kind of, it forms a bond that for many people is decades long now.
So I want to ask you, like, based upon everything going on right now with AI, it seems like every single day there's something new that drops and new developments, and so much to keep track of. I'm just curious, for helping people, what is like the number one thing that comes up for you that you would like to set them straight about, or to be helpful in pointing them in a different direction?
So it's not too late, right? I think some people are feeling like I'm behind the curve. And you don't have to just jump into what your firm has started using. I like to joke that 25 years of being Pavloved by Google, have a question, Google, was undone in 25 days of chat. But the magic I learned was not ChatGPT specific. It was not tool specific. It was learning how to learn from technology, interact with technology, and iterate in a different way. It's a different skill set. And so my advice to everyone is, even if you feel like you're behind the curve, download on a non-company device ChatGPT and start using it for low-risk ways. Because what your super secret skill is going to be is that language mastery you have as a legal person applied effectively to generative AI. There's an art and a science to prompting, and you can learn that on, finding, how do I have a challenging conversation with my 16-year-old daughter about being safe when she goes on how do I, take a picture of my refrigerator and figure out what I want to cook? How do I make sure that the sentiment of my email to my boss, who I am angry with, is cheeky and not snarky, right? But learning how to tell the model who you are, who your audience is, what your goal is, clear parameters, and break problems down, which is the entire universe of prompting, that skill translates to everything. And you can start learning it in low risk ways. So my big ask, demand, appeal to everyone is ChatGPT first. You have a question, you have a challenge. It doesn't just have to be safe. Don't put confidential information in. Don't use it for high risk stuff if you're not comfortable. But if you learn those skills, super portable. It's like learning Boolean 30 years ago. It doesn't matter what tool you were using, knowing that language, knowing how to get the technology to answer your question in the way you like in as few iterations as possible, that was magic. You've got an ability to do the same thing. And then put your issue spotting on. Think like a data scientist. I was having a chat with my chief data scientist, Arena Matviva, amazing. And I was like, listen, I think that the wordsmiths will rule the world because we know how to look at a problem and break it down and analyze it. She's like, well, what do you think data scientists do? So, yeah, I think there's a lovely cross section of the skills that we have, the accessibility of the technology, and low risk ways to train yourself to use it today. So do it. Start.
What do you think you would tell your younger self?
Um, be careful who you listen to. So early on in my career, I aimed at the people who didn't like me. I wanted to make them like me, right? Human intuition. But I didn't realize at the time that if I aimed at the people that didn't like me, they still wouldn't like me, right? Or maybe they would, but I wouldn't like them. So, find who your fans are and, be authentically you. And if you find things that work well, lean into it. But if you mute who you are or change who you are, it's almost like you're a flower that's not brightly colored. The honeybees that are going to like you don't come to it. Whereas now, if someone walks up to me when I'm dressed like a sparkly disco ball, I know that probably they'll be able to take a joke, or at least they're going to be willing to have a conversation. Whereas if I was in a gray suit with bad bangs, nervously hiding in the corner, they wouldn't know that I'm a like-minded person. So, aim for your fans. Don't change who you are to try to make someone who would maybe never like you like you. Aim for the people that you want to like you. And it spreads much further than how you look and you dress. I had people that were lovely and trying to mentor me say, hey, buxom blondes don't make VP. And my response was, I quit, next job is VP. So choose who you listen to, fans, but also people that maybe are doing what you want or trust that. And people aren't always coming from a bad place. They're not trying to hurt you. But if you aim for someone who doesn't like what's core you, you're going to find yourself as someone who's not you, not authentic, and probably unhappy. Possibly running a global tech program at a law firm that you wish, you realized sooner you didn't love.
Well, where do you think things are going? Like, where do you see the next 5 years and your role in it?
So I go back to the adoption curve. We are at double exponential growth. And I don't know if everyone understands what that means, but it took 20 years to get 100 million people to use the internet. And that year, the 20th year, there was still, I think, a Times article saying the internet is dead, right? 10 years to get 100 million Netflix users, 5 or 6 years for 100 million Instagram users, and 61 days for 100 million people to use one flavor of Gen AI. And since then, adoption's only increased. 3 months in, there was a South Park episode written by and featuring ChatGPT. What does that mean, right? It means my mom's finding crappy knitting patterns on ChatGPT. My nephew, who at the time was like 8, was figuring out how to do Minecraft on it. The world has caught up to my AI obsession. So the barriers of adoption that we saw historically in legal, they're not the same. It's actually flipped. It's not I'm explaining this abnormal thing. It's I'm explaining how we are meeting the consumer grade technology. And so what I foresee is actually a rapid and massive shift of should I use Gen AI to almost us as the experts having to pump the brakes saying, yes, we're going to use it, but let's make sure we've done all the due diligence. And so along with that normalization of the world around you, like think post.com when we know the internet's going to last, the speed of innovation is only going to accelerate. The other thing that's really interesting is it's not just brute force compute, it's how humans are interacting with the technology and training it that's leading to some pretty exponential leaps. I think Ray Kurzweil had to come out with an update of the singularity is near that was 10 years sooner, right? So we're looking at a moment in time where the tech will be on paper smarter than people. The world around us will have massively adopted it. And while some people are afraid humans will be less important, I think that this is going to be the rise of a knowledge worker dominated society where the people that have that, we have 1 trillion synapses in our brain, or maybe 30 trillion. I don't remember the math on it, but that's a factor of 1,000 or more than 1,000 times more than the biggest foundational model right now. So the humans that know how to leverage tech and take their unique native knowledge, their subject matter expertise, and marry it with technology, they're going to rule the world in a way that's even different from the last industrial revolution. So massive change, massive adoption, massive opportunity. 5 years from now, I don't even know. I don't know if we can conceive of it because I wouldn't have conceived of the last 24 months of change that we've had. and I've been shouting up the hill like Sisyphus rolling a boulder on fire for the last 20 years, and I'm surprised.
Yeah, so for everyone out there, make sure to jump in, experiment, and be a part of it because you can be. It's not too late.
Mhm.
So with that, in the time we have left, I want to turn to those couple of questions that I ask all my guests. The first of which I think you've already answered, but it has to do with you have so much going on. Like you're juggling so much. And the question is like, how do you balance things? How do you keep going? How do you keep it all organized? I know a lot of people that are listening or watching can benefit from your answer.
I think work-life balance is a lie. Like if I was aiming for that, I would feel like a constant failure because I'm on the road 230 days a year, writing and speaking and everything. But finding a balance on what fills your cup up versus what empties it is the secret
Mhm.
sauce, right? So for me, I love going and traveling and speaking, and I'll have sprints where I hit like 10 cities in like a month and a half. And then I really like going to a farm in Idaho and spending time with cows. Like find the balance on not so much balancing work, life, family, but what is making you feel fulfilled, filling up your cup, and what is draining. And I like doing both. Like I love going out and connecting and educating. It makes me feel fulfilled, but it doesn't always fill the cup. So make sure you balance those things that are going to help you not get burned out. And so I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's kind of the way that I've seen it. And for me, like so many of my friends are in the industry. I literally had my wedding on the back end of the first ILTA after COVID because I was like, hey, it's going to be 80% e-discovery people anyway. Why don't we have your company pay for it? So for me, work life, it's so commingled. And I think we're very lucky in this industry that there's a lot of like-minded people that saw a new industry forming 20 years ago and said, I'm going to jump in. But I do have to try to balance what fills me up versus what empties the cup so that I'm not trying to do all the sparkle and out there and writing from an empty cup, which is just going to be burned out.
I think that's excellent advice. And I love the fact that, breaking it down between what empties your cup versus fills you up.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, awesome. The last one, though,
All
it has
right.
to do with like after doing all of this busyness and busy work and the stuff that is fulfilling to you and fills up your cup, like how do you make it fulfilling for you? Like what is the part that at the end of the day you find fulfilling?
It goes back to when I was talking about that dopamine hit of someone saying you helped me, right? If if I'm writing and doing all this into the void and it's not helping people, it would just be exhausting. But when I talk with people and they're like, "Hey, you help me with this," or when they reach out, or I can experience the way that I'm helping them bridge the gap. That's my why. And like it happens, I'm so lucky it happens daily, it happens weekly. But knowing that all the things I'm doing are benefiting people, like it's hard to even articulate it. And I have a good friend who gives me crap. She's like, you got to quit saying you have FOMO, Kat. And I'm like, well, I'm not afraid of missing out on fun. I'm afraid of missing out on the person, connecting with the person and helping them. And so I've kind of got to balance that, don't burn myself out, but be out there and help people because that's the thread that weaves everything for me. I'm good at solving this problem and making a scary thing less daunting during a time, unprecedented time. That's awesome. I love it. So balancing that and, you know, not worrying about shouting in the void because even the people that aren't commenting are listening.
Well, that's definitely something that's worthwhile. And I want to thank you so much for being on the show, Kat, like sharing all of your experiences with everyone. I think it's been really fantastic.
Oh, thank you. It was worth chasing the cat, hurting the cat.
That's right. And I want to, ask on behalf of everyone if they want to keep in touch with you, if they want to learn more about Reveal, learn more about what you're doing, follow your writing, how can they do that?
Yeah, so for sure, go to revealdata.com and there's a blog section where I'm writing constantly. You can learn about the tools of tech, but also follow me writing, but also LinkedIn. I am prolific, might be an understatement. You might be like, oh my God, Cat is in my feed every 5 minutes. I'm sorry, but that's where you can see who's interacting with me. So other people that are leaders in the space. I try to write on key topics, try to point people in the right direction, or come to those in-person events. But Kat Casey, I've got a hot pink background. The picture may change. It's always hot pink. You can also search TechnoCat or hashtag TechnoCat, and you will find a bunch of stuff. I'm on the other socials as well, but eventually everything ends up on LinkedIn anyway. So that's a good enough place to start.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this.
Me too.
And for all of you out there, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.